welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. In this video, we will be looking at Kawasaki's ZX9R. And the model of the ZX9R that we're going to be focusing on is the one that was produced between 1994 and 1997. We're going to be looking at the history of the bike, some specs, and my riding impressions of that bike. This is the 5th episode in my Blast from the Past series. And in this series, we are opening the old photo album and taking a look at some of the bikes I've owned. I've owned a lot of cool bikes over the years, and I just thought it would be fun to share my riding impressions of those bikes with you. ZX9R History. In 1992, Honda created the CBR 900RR. And it was a very lightweight machine. It had a 900cc motor, it had an aluminum frame, but it was a bare bones machine, very much in the flavor of the original GSXR 750 and GSXR 1100s. The CBR became very popular and Kawasaki knew they had to respond. And so the ZX9R was their response to Honda's CBR 900. Kawasaki started off with a frame and suspension that was very similar to their ZX-7R. They put in a 899cc liquid-cooled 16-valve inline 4. It produced 128 horsepower at the rear wheel and 72 foot-pounds of torque. Top speed on this bike was 172 miles an hour. At the time it was introduced, the only thing faster was Kawasaki's ZX-11. The ZX-9 had a 6-speed transmission. It had fully adjustable front suspension and upside-down forks. It also had fully adjustable rear suspension with the addition of ride height adjustment as well. So there was a ton of adjustment. It was a very serious sport bike. The ZX9R featured ram air, and that actually added horsepower above 120 miles an hour. So it was a rocket in a straight line. The brakes on the ZX9R, they had 4-piston calipers in the front on big disc brakes. It also had a big disc brake out back. Its wet weight was 533 pounds. This particular bike had a Super Trap slip-on exhaust. It also had a tinted windscreen. And in these pictures, you see it after I was kind of playing around with some pinstriping to brighten up the paintwork a bit. What was the ZX9R like to drive? Well, I called this one Mr. Evil. Just thinking about this bike, it puts a wicked grin on my face. It was so snappy, it was so edgy in the power band, and even at low RPM, it just, as soon as I got on it, it pulled away, and it had such a wonderful sound. Just kind of gravelly. It wasn't overly obnoxiously loud, but it just had a great tone to the exhaust. And the power band was very smooth. There weren't any real spikes in the power band, but it just built power and built power and built power. For a tall rider like me, the ZX9R fit me very well, and really it was a comfortable all-day bike. Handling-wise, the ZX9R was, to me, the perfect combination of flickability and stability. It was one of the most confidence-inspiring motorcycles that I have ever ridden. I averaged new sets of tires on it about every 1,500 miles. That kind of tells you I was riding it aggressively. It was a very stable bike in the corners, very precise. I knew what it was going to do. I trusted it. And unfortunately, that's part of the reason I sold it, was because this bike was so capable that I was doing really stupid things on the road. Looks-wise, I thought the all-black ZX9R was the best looking of the first generation of bikes. I never particularly liked any of the color schemes that they put on the first gen ZX9. I thought they were a little bit goofy and didn't really accent the lines of the bike well. At the time, I wished that Kawasaki would have just taken their beautiful ZX-7R and scaled it up a bit. Man, the ZX9R would have been so good looking with the dual front headlights. I honestly think if they would have just put the dual headlights on it, it would have sold better. It would have certainly helped its looks. The ZX9R brakes, they weren't bad. They had the power, but they did not have the crisp feel of some other brakes that I had experienced. A quick story about the ZX9. My friend up the street owned a Ducati 748, and one day we were out riding together. We switched bikes, and at the gas station, man, when I hopped on his bike, it felt so light and so, like, just so manageable. And I thought, man, as soon as we get out on the road, this is going to be so flickable and easy to ride. The ZX9 just felt heavy. It felt ponderous. Well, as soon as we went out on the road, my friend disappeared. He was on my ZX9. He was gone. And I was riding the 748. I could, in no way, shape, or form, could I keep up with him in a straight line. And that Ducati felt so uncomfortable and so heavy steering in comparison that I was miserable on it. And when I finally caught up with my friend, he had pulled off at another gas station. He was sitting on the curb and his hands were shaking a little bit and he was smoking a cigarette. And I pulled up on his bike and he just looked up at me and he said, "That was awesome." And so that just tells you, when I got back on my ZX9, it felt so comfortable, so fast, and so easy to handle in comparison. And that just tells you how good the ZX9 was. My only complaint with this particular ZX9R relates to the transmission. On occasion, if I did not rev it high enough in first gear, let's say I was pulling out from a stop sign and I just kind of granny shifted it into second gear, it was bulky. It did not like to go into second gear. If I just held the revs a little bit longer, it would go into gear. If I revved the bike, if I was running the bike hard, I never had an issue with it popping out of gear or missing a shift. Conclusions. Man, overall, at the time I got the ZX9, it was exactly what I wanted. It was edgy, it was stable, it was easy to ride fast. For my riding style, for my size, it did everything almost perfectly. If I had a perfect bike, I would have upgraded the brakes a little bit. Its stability really shined on the roads that I was riding it on. As I said earlier, I wasn't a super huge fan of the ZX9R looks. I love the way the ZX7 looked. And again, I think if the ZX9, if they would have put ZX7 bodywork on it, it would have sold. I think it would have sold a lot better than it did. What ultimately caused me to decide to sell my ZX9R was it was so capable that I was not being a responsible driver on it. The ZX9R is a bike that I actually really miss owning, but I miss it for all the wrong reasons. I know that if I had one even today that I would have a terrible time trying to be good on it, but what a machine. What great memories on that bike, and I really enjoyed it. I'd love to know what you guys think. If any of you out there have owned the ZX9R before or currently own one and want to share your experiences, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, enjoy the ride.